My fellow Americans,
How much worse can it get?
I know how disappointed you feel because
The vast majority of the media has said nothing of substance.
this is painful, and it will be for a long time. But I want you to remember this.
the change only happens when ordinary people get involved.
It will not be a peaceful change.
To quote the great Leonard Cohen,
It will be a usurpation.
And to all who are watching this,
Democrats or Republicans,
Whether you are young or whether you're young at heart, I won't stop.
those who ignore these elemental existential facts are traitors, and the usurper will live in infamy.
may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
Good evening, everyone. Today is May 11th, 2017. My name is Brandon, and in case you did not realize, I am not Benjamin Dixon. Benjamin Dixon last night did his takeover of, I guess, his fifth or sixth takeover of the Intercept Facebook page, which seems just like a takeover, more like renting space at that point, but I don't know. It's not my business. Whatever. And so, of course, he decided to take off tonight because he worked so very hard. And he asked me and my team, or my team and I, to fill in for him. So this is the Discourse with Brandon, and I am joined, as always, by my lovely, be-dreaded producer, Richard. Say hello, Richard. Unmute your microphone.
I did remember this time. I'm starting to get better with it, although I have considered changing my Twitter handle to Unmute Yourself as my nickname. But anyway, I digress.
No one likes
Great
meditation.
show. I was just going to say, a great show we got planned today. I'm looking forward to it. And it's been an interesting week so far. So I'll let us get right into it or finish introducing who we got today.
First of all, don't lie to people. It's not a great show, and it had to be an interesting week. Second, as always, my Socratic life partner, all the way on the West Coast in Seattle, Adair Schmidt. Say hello, Adair.
I'm not in Seattle. I am in a leftist utopia. And also, let's go Pens.
Oh, please. Everywhere weed is legal. Anyway, and rounding off this square is back again the lovely John McDonald, otherwise known as Alexander the Meh. Say hello, John.
How's it going? Good to be back.
Oh, thanks for coming back. I mean, last time it was great, but let you know, we have a busy show planned for you tonight. And last time you were here, we went on for like a cajillion hours. But so we're not going to do that again.
1 o'clock, right?
It was almost 1 o'clock. It doesn't make a difference. But it's been a very busy week, as my producer has alluded to. On Tuesday, James Comey, head director of the FBI, was fired by Donald Trump, and that caused a bit of a kerfuffle. And I'm going to say a bunch of statements in a row that are going to sound like they contradict each other, but they don't. James Comey is an awful person. The FBI is awful and should be disbanded. But it's also quite problematic for the president, who's under investigation by the FBI, to release him, obviously to fire him during the investigation. But I also don't think that there is any collusion between Trump and Putin. No. So someone contradict me real quick.
No, I think you're 100% right in all of those statements. And it's interesting because I was watching. I usually have a problem with a lot of things Maxine Waters does and says because of corruption. And when I get pushback on her, I'm told off by all sorts of liberals. But she said something that it was wrong for Trump to fire Comey, but if Clinton had won, she should have fired Comey. And I can actually see a consistent logic with that. And let me explain. What if Clinton had gotten in and now keep in mind, and she was not under active investigation, meaning the Clinton Foundation investigation, which Comey alluded to in testimony, was not a thing, and her email scandal was done with, then it was perfectly within her right to fire him, and I think she should have fired him exactly for what Rosenstein laid out. Comey handled the whole email thing very, very poorly, according to how the FBI is supposed to handle things, as well as the fact that he added the added intent to a statute of law, which I have a massive problem with. But Trump firing him while he's under investigation is just bad. It's such a bad move all the way around. And the only thing that makes any sense is that he's just a petty, vindictive idiot.
Yes. So that's what I meant, right? So I think what people are going to take this as being an example of, or rather illustrative of, is that Trump is trying to hide something about, Comey was getting too close to the truth. I don't think that's within Comey's capabilities specifically to be that close to the truth that's worth firing. But even if he was, that doesn't change the fact that, to me, this says something I've always known about Trump, that he's petty and impulsive. And I think the first 100 days, even the first 2 months of his presidency, proved that pretty coherently. But I mean,
in terms of backing it up, being petty and just an idiot, when they passed the AHCA in the House, so it's still not a law. It has to go to the Senate, and they had a gigantic party in the Rose Garden. It's like you won like one step in like a 4-step process to get this thing made a law, and you're celebrating. I mean, that's just horrible. And the only reason you did that is because everything else you've tried to do in this 100 days has been shot down.
Yes, Richard, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't know I had made any noise. I was, I mean, for me, what I've seen with Comey.
I'm surprised. I'm really. Okay, go on. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, from what I've seen with Comey and the whole incident with Hillary and with the Stephen Colbert audience reacting the way they did when he tried to make the joke about it, is that Trump, and I mentioned this, I think it was last show, that Trump's basically the masked magician, and what he's doing is what normally would have happened is if any president would have taken office and the FBI and them had a tenuous relationship, they would have gone through some steps to get them removed and replaced. That's what they would have done, but they would have done it in such a way that it would have normally not really garnered much attention or much ire, and that's how it would have went down. And I mean, what Trump does is he's so brash and so just petty and reflexive that he did it in such a way that it exposes the trick. It exposes the idea that, oh, the FBI is this independent organization that is never used to to investigate or look into the opponents of a political administration or anything like that. That would be absurd. The FBI is above the reproach, and certainly nothing like a tarmac meeting between the DOJ and somebody under investigation could possibly, besmirch the integrity of such an illustrious organization such as that. Like that, what he's doing is he's just tearing all that apart.
Yep.
Well, I mean, the story of his presidency has been poor implementation of ideas that might be able to get through had he been implemented properly. Even the Muslim ban might have been more palatable had it been done, over the stretch of maybe 3 or 4 months. But it's just like this idea he keeps just slamming things home. And so from my perspective, I think the most frightening takeaway from this whole Comey being fired thing is that Trump is incredibly petty, incredibly impulsive, and does not think things through. And the most frightening aspect would be, regardless of whether let's say there is a conspiracy or whether there's not a conspiracy, the idea that you would think that firing the head of the FBI, regardless of whether or not he was actually close to the truth or not, it's just such bad optics. It's so politically stupid. It shows that he's not thinking about anything in the long term. What do you think, Adair?
I mean, really, I think we talk about Trump way too damn often. I'm quite frankly incredibly sick of it. Nothing that he's doing is remotely surprising. Nothing that he's doing is remotely, at least at this juncture, remotely worrisome. He fired an FBI director. Who actually cares? The fact that this is dominating the news cycle in the way that it is, in such that the mainstream media is like, oh, it must be mean we're getting close to something between Trump and Russia. And then us having to actually sit here, waste the time, the energy, and the brain power on refuting those claims and say, no, it makes perfect sense. Please shut the hell up and go back under your rock. Is frankly just tiring, and I really, I cannot bring myself to give. I can't bring myself to care. I cannot do it. He fired somebody. Woo.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What? Wow. Okay. Wow. What I was gonna say,
he's listening. Can't say he's not listening. Good.
All right. So what I was going to say is that, the way that people are treating it like it's this gigantic thing and it's going to halt the investigation in its tracks, when you still have the people who are doing the day-to-day investigation are still employed. Like, this isn't the Saturday Night Massacre where he fired a whole mess of people until he got rid of the special prosecutor and everyone that worked under them. He just fired the director of the FBI, which is within the president's purview. I mean, that's his right. And he's not firing off all of the people on the ground who are doing whatever the investigation into the Russia story is. So to say that this is stepping into it, I don't know. I don't care. I do still think and still believe that a special investigator is needed for not only the Russia thing, but also for the server thing, because like you said, the meeting on the tarmac kind of tarred that entire investigation, and then Comey throwing out the need for intent, which wasn't in the statute, just kind of is flabbergasting. So I'd like to see 2 special prosecutors assigned right now.
Oh yeah,
wait, quick, Brandon, a quick follow, because there was a comment, and I want to get to this. Someone named Primal Point of Order said grand jury subpoenas were issued, but in the FBI's Russian investigation hours before Comey was fired. And like literally, because him being fired does not affect the investigation, so it's really not worth talking about. It's just more pointless filler in the news. It gets Trump's name in the headlines.
Well,
people don't talk about
people didn't realize
that
James Comey is actually Batman, and so him not being part of the investigation is going to dramatically affect the ability for the FBI to be able to do it. I mean, now it's going to be it stopped.
So
there's some truth to the effect that it has a chilling effect on whoever's going to replace them. But the person that's acting that has a whole history that we should probably touch on maybe. But go ahead and make your point, Brandon.
No, we do. No, I do want to talk on Comey. I do want to speak specifically on the Russia investigation. But prior to that, I just want to say this. I'm reminded of that quote from an intelligence official a few months ago when they were trying to cool down people's expectations about this investigation. They were saying there's a lot of smoke. There's a lot of smoke, but there's no fire here. And by fire, they meant the evidence of direct collusion between the Trump campaign and Putin with the intention of getting him elected president of the United States of America. And so what becomes across as incredibly funny to me, right, is how good Trump is at making himself seem guilty of being involved in a vast conspiracy. And I think that's really the takeaway here. And I think it's a much sexier and even palatable option. I know it doesn't seem that way, but it's a much sexier and more palatable option, both intellectually and I guess even say, socially and, for your ego, psychologically, to believe that the reason we're at right now is because Trump is this sort of 10th level chess mastermind, or even that Putin is some sort of 10th level chess mastermind, despite the fact that you would think that if he was that smart, Russia wouldn't have the GDP of the state of Georgia. You would think that if he was that smart, Russia would be a better place to live. No offense to any Russians in the audience. I'm sure Russia's lovely in the summer. I would love to own a house.
Or Georgia.
I agree on a couple of
I guess my point is this, right? So it's like, I still don't think that there's going to be enough out of any investigation. Now, but I agree with you, John, that there should be a special investigator, special prosecutor appointed so this doesn't happen again. But I think that when they do that, they still won't find anything other than maybe run-of-the-mill corruption, run-of-the-mill organized crime racket between global oligarchs that you would expect to 1 or 2 degrees of the norm, right? But it's clear to me how the Trump administration they're just a bunch of sketchy people who don't know how to just even exist in the political limelight without making themselves seem incredibly guilty. Look at Spicer; he was hiding in the bushes. It's like come on. It's amazing how guilty they seem.
But that's what it is. It's like even though I want special prosecutors, I hard agree. There's nothing there for Russia. I don't think that there's going to be anything. I mean, if you look at
it
is. And if you look at just the technical background, and as I've said numerous times, you look into the technical details of what the DNC hack was and how they got to an attribution for it and who was involved in making that, you're like, this is nothing. There's nothing here. Why is this being touted out as like evidence of major state involved in another major state's elections? This is absolutely nothing, and yet we're saying that with 100% positive proof that this is an act of war. And I just think that, like you said, if there was a special prosecutor, and that's why I want one, is because we can get to the bottom of it, show that there is absolutely nothing there.
At the same time, it can be nonpartisan as opposed to bipartisan, because bipartisan is just not the same thing. But from my perspective, the reason why Trump probably fired Comey, it's surprising that he waited this long to fire Comey, right? I think it's surprising that he didn't fire him on January 21st. But he's firing him now because Comey keeps his name in the news, and that's probably just the end all be all of it. Like Trump and Comey and Russia are in the news constantly because I think there's a certain amount of legitimacy to the claim that Comey is a grandstander. like there is a certain amount of legitimacy to that. Or rather, if not actively, his name is in the news a lot. Like Comey has become this figure for both the left and the right that they're fighting. That the saga of Comey, the epic poem of Comey, is perhaps the biggest indication of where we are as a country politically, and that like every week or so he goes from being a hero of the left to a villain of the left, from a hero to the right to a villain of the right. Like everyone, people want him fired, people want him martyred. Now he's in the resistance, and it reveals just how incoherent the ideology of both parties are.
Yeah, Democrats were calling for him to lead the investigation now outside of the FBI, lead the Congress's investigation.
Yeah. And WikiLeaks offered him a job.
Yeah, and it's just
I mean, one thing I think is important is what it's distracting us from, and what it results in not being in the headlines. Yes. One thing, Medicare for All has been getting increasing support in the House. It's not there yet. There's still some, I think, 80 some odd Democrats that haven't signed on, but that's significantly less than it was a month ago, and so there's been some significant progress there. Flint still has poison water, and they're trying to steal the people's house for not paying for it, and like, there's a whole lot of other stories going on, and so I, not to push us, but we actually are 20 minutes in, so I think we can move to the next thing we want to talk about.
Thank God.
Well, I mean, I just want to say Comey is a
you
piece
can
of
finish
shit,
wrap us up.
right?
Yeah, waterboarding.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's
Who in the FBI is not a literal piece of shit? Like, name one person in the FBI that is not.
Right, so
name one.
the FBI and the FBI specifically, and the deep state generally, has become this hero of the left because they have positioned themselves in certain ways as being on the opposite side of the Trump administration, not even of the Republicans.
We're supposed to be moving on, but I just asked you to name one person that was not a piece of shit.
I mean, we're moving on to the bigger implications.
I'm waiting.
I'm sure there's some secretaries there doing good work.
Nope, you're in the FBI. You're a piece of shit.
Hey, Richard, what were you saying about
the association?
You were saying about the appointee who's filled in, who's the designated fill-in?
Yeah,
McCabe.
McCabe is essentially his wife was embroiled in a bit of controversy from taking a large sum of money, somewhere between $450,000 and $750,000 from a super PAC associated with Terry McAuliffe, who is a known associate of Hillary Clinton, and so it was part of all that whole thing, and so. That's who's out there making statements now. Yeah, and so like essentially there's a strong chance that he's very Clinton favored, so whatever statements you hear coming out of the FBI now, which I've heard in the media be treated as absolute fact since somebody at the FBI said it, now we know that's the reality, that's the fact of what the FBI thinks or does or whatever, which I think is absurd on its face, but also tinged with some Clinton touched by.
Well, I mean, this idea that the FBI, this idea is the FBI is some sort of objective organization that's just looking for the truth is just nonsense. They're a political organization. This ties deeply into the idea of like, well, Comey's actually a piece of garbage, right? And so I know John was going to talk about the fact that his history of waterboarding. Tell us about that.
He signed a memorandum authorizing waterboarding and defended it. I mean, Comey's done, actually, I will give Comey credit for pushing back against the NSA authorization to spy on every American basically illegally, but he also authorized waterboarding.
Yeah, and I mean, Comey's also famous for coming out and espousing this idea of the Ferguson effect, right? That it's like the rise in crime in certain urban areas in America was the result of people filming police shooting, which was making them more cautious about shooting people, but also more cautious about doing their job. So he was blaming essentially Black Lives Matter and other associated organizations who try to keep tabs on police abuses of citizens for the rise in crime that they were seeing in Chicago. And that's why I would say, the FBI, Comey, he was a political figure and he was acting politically in a lot of ways. And eventually he was going to get fired by Trump. Like at some point,
quickly, just on the Ferguson effect and the FBI, I just wanted to touch quickly that that's the same FBI that was keeping the statistics that we were getting voluntarily reported by the police that were woefully inadequate, and they never really went out there to try and shut people down when they quoted them as if they were the end all be all of the information that we had regarding the police shootings that we had going on before. Is like that we found that there was several times more shootings happening once we actually started counting them than the FBI was reporting. The FBI knew that the whole time, and they could have said something, and he's one of many that didn't say anything. But go ahead, Brandon.
I bring up one more thing, quick thing about him, Comey. He lied under oath when he said no Republican emails were released as well.
Yeah. So I mean, what I bring about Comey is in his place as this, between this tug of war between Republicans and Democrats, where either one group wants him fired or one group wants him burned at the stake or whatever, is that he reveals that our entire political process is, our entire political culture is so deeply tribalist, right? And why that's problematic is because it's the point where like now he's being invited to join the resistance, this avidly pro-cop, pro-state, pro-torture. I'm assuming he's center-right or at least center dude. Same with Sally Yates, is being invited to join the resistance simply because he opposes Trump. Like it's the rehabilitative effect of Trump, which sounds like the second album of Lauryn Hill's career, but that never came. But it's, the rehabilitation of James Comey is so indicative of where we are right now with basically every figure as it relates to Trump. Like whether it be Henry Kissinger.
I was just going to say, Cenk Uygur just recently published an article that I replied to that basically talked about the resistance being almost exclusively around the idea of opposing Trump, and not as in pointing out how that's problematic, but in more of a positive celebratory way in that it was the pointing out that article. And so like I think that's part of it is when you see Comey coming in, like that's being widely adopted by the resistance.
People don't realize how problematic it is to have this sort of big tent, like no ideological litmus test for any organization or party, and that's what Democratic Party is keeps priding itself on, right? Well, and before it was just generally opposing Republicans, but now it's opposing Trump and Russia. That is the only criteria for joining this huge tent that they want to construct within the political system, a huge voting block. And it's so problematic because it means that they lay down with dogs all the time. They retweet David Frum. They retweet anyone who says anything even mildly critical of Trump with no regard for what that person stands for or does and done in the past. And for the shysters out there, for like the people out who are looking to get back into the public light and because let's be honest, it's profitable to resist Trump. It's very profitable to oppose Trump.
But
that's why the media doesn't.
Yeah, and I just want to say quickly that you can organize and have a large tent and around something like a single issue, but it being opposition to a person is a terrible thing to organize around. That just fundamentally won't work. But go ahead, make whoever's hopping in there.
Well, I was going to say with Brandon, to back up Brandon's point, this is the same group of people that during the primary was trying to rehabilitate Henry fucking Kissinger. Like, these are not logically consistent people or ideologically pure people. I mean, they have an ideology, they just don't want to admit what it is. And I don't know. I find it hard.
Yes, of course they know what it is. It's not that they don't know. It's that people like this literally cannot admit what it is. And here's the simple fact of the matter: is that, and again, and I've said this numerous times, and I'm sure I will continue to say this. I said it even in an article that I wrote. What they want is equal opportunity imperialism. They like Clinton because they get to move forward on social issues, but they move forward only on issues that affect white people that happen to also be members of marginalized groups. They want the privilege that comes with the kinds of things Trump is talking about. They just don't feel that it's okay for Trump to go out and say it publicly. So they feel, well, as long as I oppose what he's saying, but not in essence what he's doing, everything's okay. They share the same ideologies.
And quickly on the point that Brandon, you were making, and that's in both of your articles, I believe, especially in Brandon's, but just also you said the homophobic, but also the xenophobic attacks. Like now being Russian basically makes you a bad person as a result of this whole Trump-Russia connection. And so like we're throwing away liberal values, or people are throwing away liberal values in order to make insults and attacks.
Well, okay, I would say there are no such thing as liberal values. Liberalism has always been a very vague ideology, and I think Adair hit the nail on the head, right? So what we're seeing with Trump and the Democratic Party, or Trump in the resistance, is just even more hyper-focused form of tribalism, right? So before it was like, Democrats versus Republicans, right? So as long as you were a Democrat, whatever you said or did within the bounds of reason, with a wide berth, because we have people like Manchin and Hype Camp, and we have anti-choice Democrats, we have racist Democrats, we have like we have anti-LGBTQ people Democrats. Most you don't succumb to the urge to say the N-word on television. You can pretty much be a Democrat. And even if you did that, they might just bleep you out if it's on MSNBC and claim you said nagger. But so, no, that point becomes, is like we think that the parties had already devolved into this antagonistic relationship with one another, more so the Democrats and the Republicans. And I think that there was on Face the Nation, they had a really good panel about this, where some guy was just like, well, the Democratic Party needs the Republican Party because they let them dictate the pace. The Democratic Party just positions themselves as the less bad party, and so they don't do anything proactively anymore. And so we end up in a situation where the Democratic Party is so heavily reliant on what the Republican Party being bad, they can't lead us towards anything. As the leadership. And so this idea of resistance, as John has said before, is so defensive because that's all they can be, or that's how they define themselves reactively. They're a reactive party. It wasn't just Kissinger, but it becomes even more problematic now because it wasn't simply just you have to have a D behind your name to be a Democrat or be one of the good guys. Now it's simply you can have an R behind your name, but as long as you're against Trump. And I know I'm going on for a long time, but I just have one more thing to say, and then I'll open it up again. And this is indicative again of the Democratic Party's failures, right? On our road towards Trump. Yeah. Insofar that still have not made the Republican Party responsible for Trump. They have still not gone out to say, you know what, Trump is not an anomaly. Like Trump is the next logic of the Republican Party. Me, an intellectual, says, well, no, Trump is the next logical step of the two-party system. You're both responsible for this little motherfucker right here. But they won't even say, hey, you know what, Paul Ryan, you're just like Trump. Lindsey Graham, you're just like Trump. John McCain, you're just like Trump. Markey, you're just like everyone. They feel they're just like Trump because they want to still pull those Republicans in. They still want to construct their constituency out of the center, and Russia is a good way to hide that they don't have a constituency.
Right, but that gets back to what I was saying.
Not a proactive one.
Right, but that gets back to what I was saying before the show with you guys. It's like they have this campaign strategy that worked for Bill Clinton against George H.W. Bush, which is we're going to steal the center and the disaffected Republicans who are okay with gay people and who aren't racist. And it's kind of like, well, you're capitulating so much space in terms of ideology, especially when we start talking about economics, that's led to the situation where we have so many materially disaffected Americans in this country, where 50% of the population is poor or living in poverty. And what happened with Clinton was an aberration. It wasn't the norm. He convinced Ross Perot to enter the election, who took 20% of the voting population, which allowed him to beat George H.W. Bush. And on top of that, you had the tech boom, which was completely inflated and at the same time pushed our economy at a much, much faster rate because there was incentivized gambling due to deregulation, which caused all of these bubbles. So, you have this string of almost lucky breaks that happened to Bill Clinton, but that's that electoral playbook that he ran of we're going to go to the demographics and we're not really going to talk about ideology or what we really stand for or make any proactive stands because that will piss off somebody. We're going to try and be a big tent has failed at this point because it's just completely see-through, and the right has just gone so far to the right that like I keep saying, Trump didn't win with a whole swarm of new people. He had the same amount of votes that Romney did plus population growth. So it's not like this is a winning strategy for the Democrats. This is just the producers.
No one's talking about no one's talking about. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I saw a comment in chat about the party. The Democratic Party is not going to be progressive from its Keith to Goer. They're not going to be progressive until progressives fight tooth and nail for the voting booth, and basically that there needs to be accountability on both sides. That we're not showing up to the voting booth to hold our politicians accountable. One thing I wanted to point out is when it, like you mentioned, or John mentioned at the top of his comment, that 50% of people are living in poverty, and if you look at the people that don't vote, it's mostly impoverished people. And if you look at the reasons that they don't vote, it's either that they don't have somebody to vote for, their vote doesn't matter, or they can't get to the voting booth because they're working, or one of the variety of other things that prevents them. Those are the top three reasons for them. And so when they're not showing up, all three of those are accurate. There isn't anybody for them to vote for, and they are working and they're unavailable to get to the booths oftentimes because of the ridiculous way we hold votes, especially midterms where less people are paying attention and they get less coverage. And I know I saw other people react, so I'll let you guys get in with some points on that. Responding to
I want to hear Adair.
Yeah, please.
Real quick, especially on that, the Democratic Party will never be liberal. Accept it. Understand the fact.
They will be liberal, not left. You mean?
Yeah.
No, they're not even liberal. Like, there is no such thing as liberalism in the United States of America. Everything is to the right. When you're economically to the right, it is impossible to be truly liberal. Understand that. Also understand that the Democratic Party is not a party of the people. They're not a party of the Big Ten. They're not a party of anyone who's opposing Trump. They are the party of wealthy white folks, and that is it. Understand they don't give a damn about you unless you can give them $10,000 in an election cycle. Understand they don't give a damn about you unless they can make tons and tons of money off you. Understand they don't give a damn about you. Why do you think they opted out? So many Dems voted to opt out of, to exempt Congress from the passage of the AHCA. Why? Because again, and let me reiterate this for you, they don't care. They're not the left. They're not liberal. They never will be. Moving forward from that, most people that vote Democrat cannot even call themselves moderate. I see so many people saying, well, I'm a Dem, I'm a lib, I'm to the left, or I'm moderate, wishing people will die without lack of health care insurance just because they happen to vote for Donald Trump. Are you serious? Well, that's your big tent. That is your compassionate part of it. No.
Well, I think we can all agree that Marcos Mustafa or whatever his name is a piece of shit. Molitsas. Sorry,
Marcos Molitsas is a piece of shit, but he's not a unique piece of shit. Just like Donald Trump is not a unique piece of shit. And I think that was the biggest contribution to the conversation that Bernie Sanders offered during the primary season, that it kind of fell off. Right, the Republican Party is not uniquely racist. Right. And this is how the conversation gets co-opted by Democratic Party, because you see these constant articles about, well, it was really cultural anxiety. It was actually racism that fueled these things. It's like, yeah, but what do you think is underlying that, right? So Adair makes a good point. And yes. When that bears, really exploring, and it's that the Democratic Party, and this combine both your points, right? The Democratic Party has convinced themselves that they're popular. They're that rich kid at the party, a rich kid at school who thinks everyone likes them, but they don't realize that everyone is either afraid of the fact that their father is owns the copper mine that everyone works at, or they're just using them. And so they've convinced them that they have this strong base. She's the popular vote president. Look how many people, but no one is voting for you. They're voting against the Republican Party. And I think at a certain point, maybe not the high level, but that mid-range level, they forget that people don't actually like them. Yeah. They forget that, people on the left, a large part of their base does not like them. And we've been having a lot of conversations about why Donald Trump won, but we need, as Bernie Sanders had said, we need to have a conversation about why Democrats lost, right? And part of that is, they don't stand for anything. They define themselves by antagonism. They hide their ideology because they know it's widely unpopular to everyone, but say maybe 25% of the population, and from a more pragmatic and structural thing, voter suppression is why they lost. Yeah, it's they're refusing to, so Marcos Molitsas can blame North Carolina, basically, the people who are blaming the Republicans or blaming the left for why Clinton lost, really, this is just a combination of them being, upset psychologically, their ego has been bruised by the fact that whoever, Clinton, who they supplant their ego with again, who their hero, their Khaleesi, their Hermione, their what other bullshit characters from fantasies that people like? I don't know. Chun-Li from Street Fighter, whatever.
One of the problems is that they're not even good at it. Republicans use a very similar strategy, and that's what Democrats have tried to do, is they're trying to emulate it, thinking that if we do what they do, we can win. But they're not even good at it. They don't even get how to do it with the people that they have to work with. It's Republicans have a certain set of people that they're working with, and they're very attuned to the dog whistling and to all those types of things, and to rallying them in such a way. Democrats are terrible at it. They have no idea how to talk to progressives and be taken seriously.
And look at what Fox News does with that messaging, like you were talking about with the dog whistling. Fox News stays on fucking message no matter what. No matter how horrible it is, they stay on message. And meanwhile, on the center left, MSNBC and all of those places, like you were just talking about, they'll allow David Frum to argue the point against Trump. It's kind of they don't have that stay on message. And so they are incredibly bad at it. They're incredibly bad at their own propaganda.
Well, it's because they ride the center. I think people pretend like this is some sort of like capitulation in the party. So we can talk about David Frum. We could talk about the liberal desire to both be incredibly vindictive against, be incredibly vindictive against those who they view not on their side. And I think me and Adair both touched on this in our articles, that they wish death upon people who don't agree with them. And a large part of that is like, it's because they're deflecting blame off of themselves, because a lot of people's job ride on the job security. I mean, the idea that the Clinton's loss was somehow either unavoidable or the result of some sort of vast conspiracy, or like that she was the victim. Their psychological health, emotional well-being relies on the fact that she's, they're not a loser and she's not a loser. But really, they lost because they didn't stand up to voter suppression in places like Michigan, places like North Carolina, places like Pennsylvania. There were 75,000 people black people in Detroit were purged from the voting rolls.
Right.
Like that's the state right there. But they didn't want to come out. Yeah, but they didn't want to come out and fight this prior to it, because another problem that they have is they don't want to be critiqued by the right. They are so desperate for the approval of Republicans. This goes just about David Frum. Liberals are so fucking stupid that they get off on the idea that they are, closing this gap between them and Republicans. They get off on the idea that Republicans are coming over to their side for no matter what the reason their side is. They get off on the idea like Obama does of going across the aisle. Even if you're not really going across the aisle, they're just agreeing with you either for political expediency because they're sociopaths, they don't have any pride, or to get back in the limelight. David Frum should be in jail.
Yes.
But now he's going to be on TV because he said something. He said something critical about Trump. And Democrats love that. They love when their enemies.
Point that you made earlier, but about like that when Democrats were empowering unions and when they were making moves that were actually helping people, 50, 60 years ago almost now, it was made a big difference. And what they've been switched to now is essentially we're going to lose less to the Republicans than we would lose if we weren't in the way of them, essentially, and that's their winning message. And you see it with them celebrating losing a vote on healthcare in the House. Like, just losing less badly is their new victory, is the new winning for them.
They literally started singing when the AHCA passed the House. They literally started to celebrate people being ready to die.
Well, they
the Democrats.
They like the boogeyman. But this leads me to a question I wanted to ask. I'm going to pose to you guys. So, like, the Republicans are evil and Democrats are stupid, or the Republicans are evil and Democrats are complicit in that evil. And so, really, I personally, there's a lot of hullabaloo over like the Justice Democrats and the brand new Congress and all of these other like dim-centered organizations that are so desperate to take over that national apparatus because they like the idea of being in. Sorry for that siren in the background. They like the idea again. They like the idea of having that national viability out of the gate. But from my perspective, I don't think that there's any room, at least as it exists now, to work within the Democratic Party. I think, and this is I'm going to tie it back into Russia. This refusal for people like Nancy Pelosi to come out in favor of single payer, what that tells me is that this Russia, albatross, this Russia witch hunt, this ghost story between Trump and Russia is their electoral strategy for 2018. Like that's what that tells me. Like this is their electoral strategy. 2018. Remember, we got to win back the Senate because Trump is going to turn us all into Irkutsk.
Well, like I said on the last time I was on, this literally goes back to internal polling from the Clinton campaign in 2015, showing that the New York Times Russia piece on her selling uranium to Russian interests was the biggest negative that she had. So they turned it around and asked them outright what I think the polling question was something along the lines of, if you were to collude with a foreign nation and it was Russia, how would you feel about the candidate? And they saw internally that this was a big negative. So they started running against Bernie when they said he had a honeymoon in Russia. And then they started running it against Trump. And then in the book Shattered, it shows that the Clinton campaign got out of that meeting, and in the first night after the election, They were sitting around with Shake Shack boxes talking about how we're going to spin this, and Russia.
Shake Shack is awful. I'm sorry. Shake Shack. I'm sorry. I'm gonna interrupt you real quick. Shake Shack is like of all like the little high end, like mid end burger places. Shake Shack is the worst. Like Five Guys is good. In-N-Out is great. Cheeseburger is good, and Bear Burger is great as well. If you want to try some sort of weird meat, and that's not a sex thing, whatever.
Okay.
Or can be. But Shake Shack shows me. The Shake Shack shows me that they make poor decisions. But please finish your story.
So they're sitting around with Shake Shack empty containers and decided that the best way to spin this and the most effective message that they could have was Russia. So this is literally coming out of the Clinton campaign. And it just, like you said, this is their electoral strategy for 2018, because rather than saying, hey, we just lost, maybe we should run on a platform that's really appealing to everybody, they said, nah, let's turn around and blame Russia so we can keep doing the same shit and get the same money from the same motherfuckers.
Yeah, and
I
would imagine that we could, if we had access to all of their email accounts, there's still similar emails going to the media, and these stories aren't just manifesting out of nowhere. That a lot of these leaks are coming from people loyal to the Clinton camp, and so on and so forth. Go ahead, Brandon. Can
I put forth this interpretation of American politics? I've only been working in political media for a long time, but here's what I see to be the problem, right? So. And I think we see this played out with this bullshit horseshoe theory that's coming up a lot too. And so you can all disagree with me if you want to. Shake Shack is shit. No, I'm sorry. That's not what I was going to say. We're not sponsored by Five Guys. But no, here's what I'm going to say. The Democratic Party has a unique problem to the Republican Party. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party at its highest levels both want the same thing. For, basically to replace public goods with private market, they replace the social contract with replace some social safety net with some sort of means tested abomination that really eventually ends up being privatized anyway, to replace human rights with private property rights, and turns basically into some sort of weird corporate fiefdom. That's neoliberalism. That's the center. That's what it is. The problem becomes with the right, and this is why the far right, the center right is better able to embrace the far right than the center left is with the far left, is because the far right can mobilize their base on these sort of issues of weird culture problems, right? So let's say, as opposed to being mad about the fact that the Koch brothers have more money than everyone in America combined, they can shift that effectively to be, well, really the reason why you don't have a job is because starting in the 1950s, immigration laws and more Mexicans came in, and they're all taking, that Mexican stole your job at Shake Shack. The problem is, so like they're able to, that's how neoliberalism empowers the far right, right? We know that story. It's a very old story. The problem is the center left, they do not have a narrative that is similar and compelling to the far right, because the far left identifies the problem with, the populist left, for lack of a better word, right? Identifies the problem with society as being capitalism. There is no way for the center left, the Democrats, to mobilize the far left the way the far right, the Republicans do the far right, because they have to keep that weird balancing act with, also being heavily in favor of capital, which you just can't do. Like the underlying ideology of the Democratic Party is antithetical to what their base wants, in a way that the right doesn't have.
Yeah, they've already gotten them to buy into the whole, being a billionaire is basically the pinnacle of social, achievement. But go ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's why they can't beat Trump. Like honestly, they set the stage for a person like Trump to come. Neoliberalism as an ideology, not just an economic system, because capitalism is an economic system. Neoliberalism is the mode of thought that inflicts upon you. Made the Trump presidency so possible in so many different ways, because it empowers the far right, and also it makes the idea of being just a successful billionaire tantamount to being just a saint. You every time they point to his taxes, I'm like, what are you doing? No one cares how much money he makes. It's you have as much money as he does. This is crazy.
And this backs up what you're making, is that if you look at who they're touring around and who's getting column inches and headlines, Mark Zuckerberg is that bastard touring around.
I want to hear that.
He's touring
Adair,
around America on a pre-presidential tour.
I don't want to hear about the head of Snapchat doing anything. Adair, it's your turn. You say something not about Mark Zuckerberg or Mark Cuban or
I literally don't. I just feel like we're having. It's just like at the end of the day, all we end up doing is spinning our wheels.
Yep.
There's not going to be any legitimate change in this country. There's not going to be any legitimate moving forward in this country until we finally get tired of it and tear down the system brick by brick by brick. And this is something that, especially just because I was checking Twitter and saw that some trolls decided to mess with some PA people, so I get to have fun tonight, folks, because I'm a jerk. Like, I like to fight with people on Twitter, so please send me some bullshit. Anyways, what a lot of people on this so-called on the so-called left, these so-called liberals, don't seem to understand is that, generally speaking, and this in particular for people of color, our oppression is not tied to the ballot box, but rather tied to the system that implemented the ballot box. Therefore, no solutions for our liberation can come from the ballot box. They must come from the dismantling of this system as a whole, and it's just a wholesale replacement. Get that? Just understand that. You're worried about Trump. I'm worried about not being murdered by police. We have vastly different worries. One of my professors, and she means well, was talking about, I'm going to go, I don't like going into the woods by myself. I only go with a friend because I'm a woman. I was like, in reply to me saying, I don't go camping because it's not safe for me as a black man, just being in a very white, very racist state outside of very small little pockets, I don't go camping. And she's like, oh no, I understand. I don't go into the woods without a friend. I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. I don't even go with groups of people because it is inherently dangerous. The system that implemented the ballot box is the system that is killing people of color right now.
Okay, can I make a point?
Until we change that system.
I agree with Adair's point. This is a good point. This is a good, not transition topic, but it reminds me I was going to say, right? So here's what I don't like to see from like liberals, because it reminds me of how like out of touch they are with reality. It's just like they need to stop appealing to two things to help them, right? Republicans and institutions, because Republicans are not going to step out. I know a lot of people like to live in this mythological, nostalgic past where Republicans were responsible for helping impeach Nixon. That's not what happened. they were pressured. They were pressured by the left. That's
the
not
left.
It's like we all remember that the Republicans are a big con job most of the time, but suddenly when it comes to the idea that they really hold these institutions to the highest degree and the rule of law and the Constitution and all those, we don't think that that's bullshit for some reason. Even though the violations of people's constitutional amendments in the numbers of millions and for decades hasn't seemed to bother them enough to get into the streets. But go on.
There has never been a point in American history where the Constitution has applied to everybody equally, and there's such a huge difference between the law and law use, and also morality. Those are three different things: morality, law, and law use, and they are not the same thing. And so when I see people the reason why people are appealing to the deep state is because liberals like the idea that these institutions are going to save us, the police are going to save us, and that's what makes them so lukewarm about demonizing the police when they shoot like 80 black people for like a month since the beginning of the United States of America, because they still believe in the idea of the institution, right? And by institution, I mean both the agency and also the law itself. And so you have people coming out and writing these op-eds about, Trump firing Comey is the end of the republic and the end of the democracy, and all of these these lofty ideas are finally dying with Trump. And I warn you to stop that, because that makes Trump seem like a unique evil. And again, if you think that, you're wrong. If you think Trump is the unique evil, you're wrong. If you think Trump is worse than George W. Bush, you're wrong. You are simply wrong. And it reveals about you that you're overly focused on his rhetoric. Now, don't get me wrong. Is Trump firing, Comey incredibly problematic and sketchy? Just to go back on, absolutely. It's so sketchy and so problematic. It just reminds me how dumb he is. There are so many better ways you could handle this situation with Comey if you felt that he was actually going to be a legitimate threat to you. That him doing it this way is hilariously bad, and it shows how much he really just doesn't think things through. But in terms of this other stuff, it's like no, you have to again, the hardest, I said this when he first got elected, the hardest part about the Trump administration is going to be people who are just awoken to the nature of American society and the fact that it's like the America as like this big house has burned down if it was ever even built to begin with, and so they conflate everything that's wrong with America that they are finally observing with Trump. And so what we really, as commentators now, we have to do, and a lot of times it makes it seem like we're giving Trump we're being soft on Trump. Like, no, it's actually important to be able to point out, like, hey, what is Trump doing that is, business as usual? Like for example, when he fired a bunch of when he fired all those people, like, yeah, that happens all the time. When the website went down, happens at every president. It should know, like, what is he doing? That's just the next logical step. What was he doing that the Republican Party had been building towards for the past 40
one that comes
years?
To my mind is
and what is he doing? Is anomalous.
You mentioned George Bush.
What is he doing?
I was going to say, you mentioned George Bush, and there's Dick Cheney. If we remember Dick Cheney is like, one of the problems that a lot of people have with Trump is profiting off of the presidency, personal profit off of the presidency. We remember Dick Cheney and what was going on there is like, not only was there, so he put it in a blind trust, and so now we're supposed to pretend like he's not profiting off of it and everything's fine and all good, and that's what Republicans did anyway. But people were dying as a result of shoddy work that was being performed by the contractors that were getting these no-bid contracts from the government that were personal friends with the people that were putting the bids up in the first place. And so this is it's been a long history of this stuff, I want
to back up Richard's point here, because there's one thing that's one thing that's almost as bad as what you're talking about with Halliburton. The Department of Justice slapped Halliburton with a fine for destroying documents because of what they did with the cement that was sold to the drilling platform that caused the Deepwater Horizon explosion, because Halliburton sold it to them knowing that the cement would not be effective at that depth. And they had it up on their website. It's archived that this product was up on their website, and they only got fined for destroying documents because they destroyed all evidence, not only that they sold it, but that they researched this cement. I mean, they caused one of the biggest environmental disasters in history, and it's directly on them. And the Department of Justice just let them fucking walk.
Well, yeah, I mean,
which Department of Justice? Exactly.
Yeah. Trump is something that we've been building to for the past 40 years, right? And so the only thing that makes there are two things that make Trump especially unpalatable. It's his lack of media training, or rather his lack of media formality, and also, well, that's really just it. A lot, and because he could get the same thing. Oh, sorry, and also his impulsiveness, because he could get the same things done if he just took time, but he doesn't have that kind of patience. And so, frankly, it's frustrating. And by that I mean we can't let. This is not meant to shame any people who are in the center, right? Any people who've been asleep. But it is meant to say that those people, especially at the Democratic Party, cannot be allowed to lead the legitimate resistance to Trump, or rather to Trumpism, to the state, to the system itself, because that's what we're really fighting here. They cannot be allowed to dictate what the term of this engagement is, and they certainly can't be allowed to to tell us that Trump is some kind of anomalous threat to America. Right. It's like, no, Trump is I would say 80%
they're praising the CIA to push back against Trump. That's like
they're praising the CIA and FBI. Yeah, that's all you need to. That's all you need to know, because like you can know how problematic the CIA is by going to the Wikipedia page. It's like right. If you go you can COINTELPRO is on these people on the intelligence agency committee. There's a whole section about stuff like that, and they any port in a storm. It shows that they don't have.
If you passed a basic history class in high school, you should know how problematic the CIA is. You should understand how problematic the country is. Just how we get so caught up in picking little bits and pieces out here, and well, they did this, so they did this, and this happened here. Or well, what about this? And we deify people that are absolute garbage. We don't take the time to just sit down and deconstruct why we believe what we believe in, and we're so willing to follow blindly off this damn cliff. that people are seriously up in arms over Trump without realizing this is, like you said, the logical conclusion to everything that we've been doing for the past 200 plus years. The next logical conclusion after this is fascism, is full-on outright fascism, and then the next logical conclusion after that is the complete and utter collapse of the United States of America as a country.
Well, I think it's actually. I think honestly, Adair, I think you're wrong in your prediction. I think you're wrong in your prediction. You're saying that we're going to move to fascism. I don't think we're going to move to fascism. I think we're going to move to a neo-feudalism based on corporate rule.
Yeah, we're gonna all be in corporate fiefdoms.
Pretty much.
So pick one. Choose wisely. Choose your wisely.
I mean, no. Honestly,
Cap America.
We're going to go to fascism because what you say makes sense. But here's why I say we're going to go to fascism is because fascism is going to ride in on a populist wave. Because people are going to get fed up and be like, all right, I would rather, because again, the Dems have no such thing as a backbone, and the way the political system is set up in America, there's absolutely no way we're actually going to let this party out there. We'll never actually be able to get a real Green Party, a real Labor Party, a real, like, whatever you want to call it, party that is economically to the left. So everyone's like, oh, Trump and Bernie were populists, and Bernie was a terrible person, and so was Trump. But look at them, they're populists. They're populists. Sure, Bernie was a populist centrist, and sure, Trump used some populist language. He's not a populist. And that's the key, is Trump is going to put a lot of people off, but populism is going to bring a lot more people on. And I think we're going to move further and further to the right. We're going to move more and more towards authoritarianism.
Keep this going, but quickly, I just want to say we have about 2 minutes left in the hour. We have about 2 minutes left in the hour, just as a heads up on that. But we can keep going.
I was going to say, I think pettifogging over the terms of like it's something that people do when fascism doesn't actually affect them, right? It's just like
wait, hold on. Let me make my point though, okay? But the reason why I don't think we're going to hit the fascism is because the actual end goal of the people who are pushing fascistic means is to empower the corporations and de-empower the state. So we're not seeing these people consolidate state power. What we're seeing is they're using state power to make corporations and make the wealthy more empowered. So as a direct result of that, I don't see us moving towards a fascist state where they control everything themselves, towards some grand war movement, but rather towards de-empowering the public portion of the state and allowing the corporations to just be like, oh, okay, who do you work for? Okay, they provide your health care. They're talking about incentivizing public schools by giving them the credits for giving you, an employer, something for charter schools. They're talking about doing health incentives where it's like, okay, your employer pays for your gym, which gives them this, but they're going to give you a Fitbit so that they can track everything that you do so that they get a discount on their insurance for you. I mean, my old companies used to take out what they called a peasant insurance policy on me, that in case I died while I was out at sea, they would get paid millions of dollars on my death. Not my wife, not my family, but they would get paid millions of dollars on my death. And I think that the fact that that's legal and the fact that that's common practice,
they don't have to disclose it to the person that they're taking the policy out on either. Like they can keep that private.
My only point is that I agree with you, John. Right. So my only point was that quibbling over definition of like whether we're going to be like what fascism is, as opposed to what really it's going to be. It's like a neo serfdom. like a neo. Like
it's probably going to be better to be under the Google
libertarian
tent than under like the Uber tent, but
right.
It's still going to be.
I mean, we're all going to be working. 18-hour days, 22-hour days, like mining for cobalt in the Comcast, Amazon, Google mines.
Yeah.
With our basically 7-minute lunch breaks. That's what it is, and it's
that's where they want us.
Neo serfdom, but I agree with Adair. This is a good point to make, right? So I'm so tired of hearing these dumbass articles from people in the center about horseshoe theory and how Trump, populism is to blame, and Trump on this populist wave, and I speak French. I took French in college, but I can't pronounce it. But
Mélenchon.
Yeah, Mélenchon was like his supporters were actually supporting Le Pen because populism is populism. It's like, first of all, you reveal yourself to be uneducated when you call ethno-nationalism populism. Not only do you reveal yourself to be uneducated, you reveal yourself to live in to be a neoliberal, right? And so ethno-nationalism is different from populism. Although again, populism is not even really like an ideology. It's a governing strategy / organizing tool in the same way that you would say in a lot of ways, anarchy in some of its manifestations is not like is a you know, an organizing tool. It's about acephalous organizing. Same with like populism. It's about, you know, it's a organizing, and it's a general philosophy around governance. It's not an ideology.
Right.
Anyway, but like this desire to conflate the far left to the far right in terms of, well, you see, the far left, they blame the bankers for putting us all into wage slavery and debt slavery, and for basically having, you know, the bankers and the billionaire class for putting us in a position where basically everyone is living paycheck to paycheck. And the people on the right, they blame the Mexicans and the Jews and black people and, you know, women and SJWs for doing it. I can't tell the difference. Like, everyone's just blaming somebody. And it's just like, are you serious?
See Joanne Reed.
It's like, yeah, it's just like, it's like, yeah, like ethno-national. The difference is,
yes,
right?
Vice.
Populism, as it's not necessarily intended, but like when people mean it colloquially on the left, is the idea that the state should, you know, function in the best interests of everybody or the majority of people and not serve the oligarchy, right? And just because the right sometimes adopts a critique of the state and then uses that critique transforms that critique of the state into some sort of critique of globalization and, you know, minorities and etc. It's like they take, you know, they take a left turn at Albuquerque on that one, because in the same way there is a good critique of globalization coming from the left, right?
Yep.
And it's like, you know, we're not talking about the free movement of people, we're talking about the free movement of capital,
right?
And, you know, in a lot of ways people move with capital, but that's not the same thing. It's not the free movement. Like, if you bomb someone's country, people aren't allowed to freely move. And so both sides, you know, far right and far left, are lobbing critiques at the state, but they have entirely different, you know, prescriptions for how you solve those problems. And to pretend as though they're basically the same because, you know, in your uneducated mind, you could theoretically see some shallow similarities, is just, you're being disingenuous. Like, I don't know, or maybe
but they're being disingenuous on purpose. I mean, Joanne Reed went to an Ivy League school, has worked with people who have probably told her, "Hey, you know what? Your hot take's wrong," and yet she's continuing her hot take for a reason. They're being disingenuous because they're paid to be disingenuous.
They're hot takes. I mean, some of them, I feel that way about Chris Hayes. Some of them are incredibly stupid and I think a lot of them are just like, some of them are purposely obtuse, like Chris Hayes, and I think maybe Rachel Maddow. And some of them are just greedy, and some of them are just, you know, they've drunk the Kool-Aid. I think Joanne Reed drank the Kool-Aid.
I think a lot of them are actually dumb. And let's talk about, let's explore that.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
There's a huge conflation, like you said, with populism and ethno-nationalism, and let's look at that deeply. Let's use Vice News as a great example, because Vice News absolutely dropped the ball on this. I enjoyed working with them in Philadelphia as much as I could. I absolutely have nothing but disdain for them right at this moment. They said how to speak like a populist, and the people that they put on the front were Le Pen, Trump, and Duarte over in the Philippines. That is not populism. Popularity is not populism.
Yep.
Populism in red, scary font with squiggly underlines and a menacing background logo that looks vaguely like the Communist Party's logo is it's neoliberal propaganda, and it's the most American kind of propaganda I have ever seen in my life. You have to understand what it is and what it is not. And we have to stop giving into this garbage fear. You're so worried that a true populist like Bernie Sanders is going to come along and, you know, stop your company from making $80 billion a year, that your corporate overlords, and you're no longer going to be able to get to that 1% of 1%, that quote-unquote American dream that you have. Get the hell over yourself.
Well, I mean,
I just want to say really quickly, I want to say quickly that there is Tamron Hall, Joy Reid, and Melissa Harris Perry all at MSNBC before the 2016 race got underway and really took off and all that stuff. And one of them has remained, and it's the one that was the most consistent and the most did the most work in buying into and selling the narrative that they wanted. So that, we're talking about people getting paid to express these types of opinions, I think that shows some some evidence of
that. Was
people,
and that was exactly my reasoning behind Joy-Ann Reid just being paid and just being a complete and total sellout.
Well, what I was going to say is that people can, like, when people in the establishment refer to populism, basically they just mean anyone who's lobbying a critique of the establishment.
Yes.
Because they can't tell a difference, right? So it's like ethno-nationalism looks exactly to the same as them as socialism does, if not better, because at least when ethno-nationalism critiques the state, it doesn't have any implications for their actual bottom line, only in the way they feel about how they earn that bottom line. Whereas when socialism critique the state,
with all that money that she might have drunk the Kool-Aid by now. But go ahead and continue. That was an important point. Continue.
No, I was gonna say, so like ethno-nationalism, when you're the state, when you're the establishment, or at least when the establishment has left you enriched, any critique of the establishment looks exactly the same. And I think that's what we can talk about the difference between big P populism, if that's a real thing, or little P populism, if that's a real thing, which probably not either. But ultimately, it's just like when you're in that middle, and when you're that establishment, any critique of the state it just appears as an attack on you. And that's why I say, liberals appeal to institutions. They appeal to U.S. institutions for safety from Trump because they don't understand two facts. Like, Trump is just the logical extension of the state, and or the state, unmasked, in that the institutions of the state, whether you're talking about laws or schools or police, all they can ever do is reinforce the state and perpetuate it.
But look at how much
solve Trumpism with the state. You can't solve Trumpism with the FBI, with the CIA, with the police.
Especially in the black left, we've all been failed by those institutions some point of our in our life. Yeah. So it's a lot easier for us to easily not have any faith in them than it is for some people who might have been saved or protected by those precise institutions.
Of course, because the state
were never meant for people of color. Not a single institution in this country was ever meant to actively protect people of color. Not a single institution in this country was ever meant to actively protect LGBTQIA plus folks. Not a single institution in this country was made to protect anybody but cisgendered white folks and cisgendered landowning white men in particular.
But that's what I say. I'll interrupt you. I know I'm supposed to do that. But here's the thing: not even them sometimes. And I think we've seen in the past 10 or so years is that every so often the middle class white, et cetera, becomes sees that the state is not even really there to protect them. Just people who either resemble them in some way. The only people who think the institution can save them are people who have some form of privilege, either male, white, rich, Christian, whatever it is. So one or more of those, and you believe in the state because the state maybe 75% of the time protects you, and the other 20% of the time is not too obtrusive in your life. But if you don't have all that privilege, you realize that the state, like the republic. Oh my gosh! Ooh.
But look at what you were talking about earlier when you were talking about how the discourse and the ideology, and how Adair was saying that they ideologically lied to themselves.
Discourse. Someone drop a bucket of confetti.
He said the name of the thing in the thing.
All right. So anyway,
go ahead.
What I was saying is, like, when Tillerson basically took the veneer off the State Department and said, we're no longer going to have humanitarian objections to allies because it impedes what we want at the State Department. And everybody on the fucking center left went apeshit. And it's like, what are you talking about? Saudi Arabia is one of our biggest allies. Egypt is literally right now rounding up gay people and throwing them in prison. Qatar and what they're doing with the World Cup and with thousands of slave laborers dying in the hot sun right now, and it's like, how are you talking about humanitarian rights across the country? Like, America's going to spread this great exceptionalism with our foreign policy, when really this department, all they've been doing is propping up the image of America without really doing anything. It's just propping up all those institutions that we're talking about, and that's.
Go ahead.
Anyway, go on.
No, I'm sorry.
No, I was just rambling at that point.
Institutions, just from institutional theory, can only ever serve to reinforce the underlying ideology that created them. They can't deviate from that. Like, that's just not how they work. The office of the presidency cannot be an anti-imperialist thing. Like it's just not how it works. And I don't understand. And so when people reveal themselves for having drunk the Kool-Aid, human rights is an example of that. the idea of human rights, or the idea that America as this sort of humanitarian actor at home and abroad is just, gaslighting, for lack of a better term. In order to justify American imperialism at home, at home because it's neo-colonial, black sites, but whatever. Abroad, there's two arguments: self-defense and imperial and human rights, which I guess is then self-defense of other people. But that's going back as far as colonialism has, as saving brown people from themselves. It's just that's what human rights is. We have to save, the people in the global south, the people in the east, people in Africa, people in South America from themselves. They cannot be allowed to self-govern because they will violate human rights. And we have these conversations, and the way in which we enforce human rights, instead of actually building these structures of, these long-lasting infrastructure where people can actually exercise some agency, and it's still solving water crises in Syria, solving education crises, or militia crises in the Congo. All of these problems that could be solved with long-lasting actual nation building. Instead, we just bomb the shit out of them, and we do it by justifying. Remember, okay. For great example, how was the first Gulf War justified? First Gulf War. People, Iraqis were going into maternity wards and killing newborn babies in their mothers, in their crib.
Incubators. It was incubators. They were taking them out of incubators and throwing them on the ground.
That was obviously a lie. It came out that was a lie. No one went to jail for it. How was one of the narratives surrounding the second Gulf War, Iraq invasion of Iraq? Well, look how they treat their women. It's this narrative of white people having to save brown people from themselves or other brown people. Is the undercurrent of imperialism and the undercurrent of, and that's what we call human rights. But I do want to switch topics.
Quickly before we move off that topic, I just wanted to mention that Morning Joe had Condoleezza Rice on there, and they kind of touched on this Joe made the point basically that perhaps the people in the Middle East, just their culture isn't, they can't handle democracy. Their culture isn't ready for it. They're too savage. And Condoleezza Rice had to push back against it. And so, to her credit, she was like, that's I strongly reject those types of arguments that suggest that it's a cultural issue that's got there's a whole lot of reasons that people in the Middle East and us, we don't get along. The fact that they're cultural is not really at the core of it. Go ahead.
It's called material conditions. This idea that you can separate out the culture, quote unquote, of the place from their material conditions is such claptrap, and it was something that was debunked in the early 20th century by anthropologists and other people. The idea that the reason they're so backwards is because they lack the inherent biological or cultural or social fortitude that Westerners have, and we have to go in there, we have to show them how to do things. It's the reason why is because you've been siphoning wealth out of their countries in the form of strip mining for about 100 years now, right?
Right.
But but it is what it is.
She didn't know much about the Middle East, but she knew a lot about Russia, and even she thinks it's kind of ridiculous what's going on with Russia, how the investigation into Russia and all that stuff's been going on. But go ahead and continue, and then we got to transition, like Brandon said.
It's
15 minutes, and then what?
Then we're done.
Why?
Stops.
Hour and a half.
We will keep going until we're done. We're going to transition to Betsy DeVos and Bethune-Cookman in a second. But let's have John to make the last point.
Well, what I was saying is about this whole idea of democracy. It's like Middle East had democracy in my lifetime. I mean, in 1979, they overthrew a democratic election, and I mean, you see that all across anywhere where we're forcing our imperialism on other countries. We take democracies, dismantle them, and put in strong arms and strongmen. I mean. And so it's like, how can you make that argument that they're not ready for democracy whenever they do make a democratic or populist decision, we overthrow it? Like, that's not.
Well, their democracy has to agree with us, or it's not democracy. It's basically what it boils down to.
Right.
That's called anyway. But you know what else? Turkey women had the right to vote in Turkey way before they did in other parts of Europe.
Yeah.
The Turkey had female judges before parts of Europe. It's this idea that these places are inherently backwards by nature of who lives there. But but pointing to individual actions that was indicative of that. Same with North Korea. Like anyone who doesn't know the history of the Korean War doesn't really have business going on TV advocating that the leader of North Korea is crazy.
Right.
But
or that
I do
more
want to
people get
transition to
thrown
talk
in,
about
or a higher percentage of people get thrown in jail for smoking pot in America than do in North Korea. Like,
Yep.
I mean, it is what it is, right? Obviously, I'm not gonna get involved with that. I wanted to transition to talk about Betsy DeVos gave the commencement speech at historically black college, Bethune-Cookman in Florida, and the students there had a bit of problem with that, right? So we know Betsy DeVos is the Secretary of Education in the Trump administration. She was given that job because she basically bought it. She is a big proponent of school privatization, under the nomenclature of school choice. She's a religious zealot. Her brother is the head of, I want to say, Blackwater?
Mm-hmm.
Blackwater.
Which no longer exists, but yeah, same guy.
Is it Academy now? Academy? Is that what it is?
He's got a couple of them, including one where he's actually creating a private army for China. So it's a weird.
Great. Yeah, he's a real bucket of laughs.
Yep.
And we remember Betsy DeVos' her last engagement with a historically black college was when she went to Howard unannounced, and the students at Howard, basically, protested her appearance because, again, unannounced, and they don't like what she stands for. So she was invited to speak at Bethune-Cookman, and the students at the commencement, they were told if they didn't show up, they wouldn't be receiving their diplomas, I believe. At one point,
yeah, he said something on stage about how like your diploma will be mailed to you, and it's like, aren't they always?
Yeah. I know. I think they gave us
essentially they were going to stop the ceremony if they didn't stop. And she was speaking before. Obviously, they had collected their diplomas, so the ceremony would have been over if they didn't stop. Is the threat? But go ahead, continue.
Yeah. So basically, they all turned her back. They all turned their backs on her, booed, and it is what it is. As right now, I believe the NAACP is requesting the resignation from a lot of people who work at Bethune-Cookman, a lot of the head administrative staff who decide to bring her there to speak. And so I bring this up because I think we haven't really had a conversation about this myth of value neutral platforming. Platforming as the general trend, right? There's this myth that you can invite somebody to speak at your commencement like Condoleezza Rice or like, Betsy DeVos. I want to divorce this conversation from the Richard Spencer and, I want to divorce the conversation from Richard Spencer and the Ann Coulter scenarios because I think we've talked about that enough. And line this up more with people like Brett Stevens getting columns at the New York Times. There's this idea that you can just have this value neutral platforming of what is essentially a radical right wing idealist or ideologue, and that doesn't say anything about your organization or you. And so the NAACP is requesting resignations, and they're right to. And all I'm waiting for now is a bunch of articles in the Washington Post and New York Times decrying the fact that these students wouldn't even listen to this, wouldn't listen or engage within the discourse. Whatever, guys. Whatever. They wouldn't engage in conversation or respectful discourse with Betsy DeVos. And it's like, but she's already proved herself to be incompetent, guys. It's like, how many times do we have to have this conversation with these same people that are incompetent? And I know you had an interaction with David Frum.
Yeah, no, it wasn't with David Frum. It was actually with the creator of The Wire, where he was retweeting David Frum. And I basically said, you can make the same point without retweeting this accessory to war crimes. And he said, this is the disease of this left. And he said, I'm a leftist, and this is the disease of this ideas where we can't allow certain people to speak. And I said, no, you can allow them to speak, but why are you retweeting a war criminal and then acting like that's not an immoral decision? Like this guy should not be should not be employed at the Atlantic, first off. I mean, he should be being tried at The Hague along with our ex-presidents. But instead, he's added as this voice of reason. And again, it gets back to the whole Trump thing, but we're not even talking about that. Let's just say, take the idea out of it. The fact that anyone is retweeting him is beyond the pale for me.
Well, no, I agree with you. And I think the same thing goes with people who, like that's why I wrote about the Betsy DeVos situation. This idea that I can retweet David Frum. I can retweet Henry Kissinger. Does he have a Twitter? I don't know. I can't believe that he's not actually dead and just like a ghost or whatever. He's so fucking old and awful. But anyway,
I can't wait. I'm gonna have a party the day that he dies.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come. I don't care. Anyway, right. but that is, you can retweet articles from Breitbart. You can retweet these things, and it says nothing about your ideology. It says nothing about your morality. And but the obvious counter to the point that the guy was making, the creator of The Wire was making, is that if this person wasn't who they were, you wouldn't be retweeting them, right?
Right.
It's you're not retweeting David Frum because he came up with this great new unique idea, and the only way for you to encapsulate it would be to retweet the original owner, or at least to pay him some kind of pay him his due for coming up with it. Yeah, pay him his due for coming up with it. You're retweeting him because he is a right-wing ideologue. You're retweeting him because of who he is, and you're trying to borrow the legitimacy that someone like David Frum is on your side, or I thought that Brett Stevens is writing at your paper, but you don't want to engage with the entirety of their work, right? You don't want to engage with, he said it was a disease of the liberal mind or some nonsense, but it's like, no, I'm just judging you for like platforming awful people.
Correct. And that gets back to DeVos. I mean, DeVos has literally said that we need to push for reforms in education to bring us towards the path of God, I think was their exact words. It was something along those lines. And it's kind of like, how is it that you can say she's a viable person to have on at any college that's not a Christian right-wing college? I mean, if you're a Christian right-wing college, Betsy DeVos is the commencement speaker for you. Go at it. I mean, she's ideologically right in line with you. But if you're if you're any college, honestly, that's it. She's done. She should no longer
especially if you're an HBCU, because she called HBCUs pioneers in school.
Pioneers of choice.
Choice.
Yeah.
She said that institutions that were built as responses to Jim Crow and segregation, and that I would argue people still attend to this day because of the proliferation of hate crimes on campuses around, especially in the South, right? Especially where these places, like the idea that there is hate crimes on these campuses. We see, there were riots at Ms. U after Obama won re-election. It's like, so people go to these places to be, to have, they have an educational experience.
I was gonna say, how many emails I get a week from my ultra liberal arts campus in Washington State about people drawing racist graffiti, about people being attacked on campus, about the number of times I've had to go to the First People's Multicultural Center. The fact that we must have one on campus, and that's like the only safe space for a lot of students of color to go and have tutoring help or whatever, or just to go and not feel like we're constantly under the threat of attack or just ostracized at this university, is staggering.
Yes.
And I live in liberal ass Washington. I've quite honestly thought about transferring to an HBCU, and I'm heavily considering them for one of my requirements now for graduate school is I need to go to a university that is in a place with a large number of people of color, because I can't do this shit again.
Don't do Boston.
6 more years of being the only black man within 2 miles.
Don't do Boston.
Well, there goes MIT.
MIT is a good school, and MIT is, I would say, probably racially diverse and actually not bad in that regard. But Boston itself is racist as fuck.
Well, I mean, the idea to use Betsy DeVos to broach this topic was kind of me just like, I don't know. It was a reach, Brandon. But it's an important one, right? Because it keeps coming up, right? This idea that you can give space, and not only just space, right? Because people like to pretend like, well, we're just having a conversation, right? But this is not what that is. Like when you invite someone to be the commencement speaker at your school, when you give someone a column in the New York Times, when you decide to platform somebody and elevate their voices over others, you're making the decision that, hey, this person has things that are worth hearing, right? Because you're not platforming everyone. You're not inviting everyone to your school. They didn't invite, Betsy DeVos and then to be the warm up, and then in the second act it was going to be Reverend Wright. It's like that would have been a fire. That would have been like a fire commencement. Everyone would love that one. But like it's this idea keep proliferating through like liberal media that the media I promote and consume, and the outlets I consume and promote don't really say anything about my ideology or morality. It's such a disingenuous, like that little disclaimer that they put on all their little op-ed sections that the opinions expressed
Hold
by
on,
people.
real quick. I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I just saw this in chat and it just came up. Michael Stapleton, because I want us to talk about this, because this is turning your back on a millionaire that controls your loan and college funding is not effective in your quote advocacy. So first of all, boo boo, she don't control my loan. Well, she has a stake in a company that does. Well, my A. B, she also doesn't control my school's funding in the sense that I don't go to a public K through 12 school, and a lot of schools, a lot of universities, in fact, get public funding. Not public funding in that sense, but public funding in the sense that they get it from the state. On top of that, HBCUs have an incredibly rich history of having to fundraise, my guy. Turning your back a racist Christian ideologue who has absolutely no business doing anything ever. It's a great move for advocacy, and quite honestly, to be quite honest, I'd have started a chant, "Fuck you, Betsy," but that's just me.
No, but see,
like that's me, and I'm extra.
But his comment talks to like the disingenuousness of like the liberal class, right? Yep. Maybe he's not liberal, I don't really give a shit, doesn't make me any difference. But like this idea that like there is no proper way to resist things, right? It's like we're supposed to be having this marketplace of free ideas, but if I say, okay, well, you know what, I don't want to buy that one. I think that the Betsy DeVos's of the world are, I've heard enough from them. I know what they're going to say. She's not going to surprise me. And if she is, or her history is too problematic for me to engage with. I don't care if David Frum is releasing the hottest R&B album of 2017.
Before you go on, there's also one thing that they're ignoring, which is the power differential inherent in the arguments. Like what you're saying is, okay, well, the people are just being disrespectful or whatever to Betsy DeVos, who are protesting Betsy DeVos, are at a distinct power disadvantage to Betsy DeVos. Anyone who, like myself, who's going after David Frum is at a distinct power disadvantage to David Frum. I mean, and it's not the same power disadvantage, but at the same time, there is a distinct disadvantage. So when you don't take that into account, you're in that argument that he was making, it's completely thrown out the window logically as well.
Look, because people want to pretend like it's fine, but like you should cancel your subscription to the New York Times. You absolutely should, and protest, because otherwise they won't fire him. It's like you are not being put on equal footing with Brett Stevens, who is going to just write article after article about climate denial. His first article came out,
and how much he hit Muslim.
Yeah, it's like, his first article came out and he tried to frame it in this way that, well, there's a certain amount of volatility to predicting climate change, and the scientists who are acting like, well, we have it down to a science are lying to you. So he calls himself climate
science. We literally have it down to
but the thing, like he calls himself a climate agnostic, right? But what he's there to do is he's there to muddy the water. And what he's there to do is they say the temperature is going to go up by 3 degrees over the next 5 years, but it could be anything from 1 degree to 12 degrees. They don't know what they're talking about. It's like, do you realize how dumb that's just there to muddy the waters and and to sow doubt and manufacture that. Not only is he a climate change denier, but what got mixed up in that conversation, or lost rather, that he's also anti-black and anti-Muslim.
Yep.
It's like he called Islam the disease of the mind.
Yeah.
But so it's not even that they're having the conversation internally, right? But because they don't even have people. They don't even have pro BDS people in the New York Times op-ed section, do they?
No, I doubt it. I really don't think they do.
And I bring up the New York Times because they had an anti-choice op-ed in there the other day, from a woman who was talking about how she was a teen mom, and now she's an investment banker, and that's why we can't treat abortion as though it's like an economic issue, because it's really not one.
Yeah,
but here's the thing, right? And that woman. Let me finish the statement though. That woman works for a group who calls abortion a modern day Holocaust.
Wow.
And it's just like these are the people that the New York Times is providing not only a platform for, but a certain amount, an air of legitimacy to. And you can't sit there and, and not sound like you're fighting, not sound like you're arguing semantics to say, well, you don't understand. At the top of the article, I put the little disclaimer: this person's views do not reflect that of the outlet. Like, yes, it does.
Yeah,
it at least reflects what you consider to be legitimate discourse. Like, it at least reflects what you think is like legitimately in the bounds of what should be considered, and what you think is in the bounds
ideas.
Yeah, the limits of your ideas, and honestly, the New York Times is like as a liberal outlet, it has the range of its ideas range from climate denial to anti-Islam, but it doesn't go all the way to socialism or BDS. And again, that's in a nutshell.
I bet you they wouldn't even give a column to Matt Taibbi.
Of course not. Or David Dayen. They wouldn't give They wouldn't give a column to anybody who was espousing anti-establishment or anti-corporate ideas.
Let me ask you guys a question. Do you guys think they would have published any of our articles that we had recently, especially covering the bevy of topics that we did? I don't think that outside of places like PA, outside of independent media, we would have even had any snowball's chance in hell of having that kind of stuff published, because it directly counters the narrative that they're so used to putting out. And what they fail to realize is they are responsible for the actions people take after reading this. They are responsible for giving that woman a platform if someone who reads that then decides to go out and murder an abortion physician. So rather, a physician who does abortions. They are directly responsible if someone goes out after reading that Islam is a disease of the mind and commits anti-Muslim hate crimes. You are directly responsible for that because you are giving them that platform. You are giving them that microphone in which to spread and get a much larger audience. And you lead to the direct radicalization of people when they do that. We hear all the time about how people are in the Middle East are being radicalized into radical Islam, but we never want to talk about how we radicalize our own people in America, especially those on the right. Yeah. And it starts with things like this. It starts with things that are considered innocuous. Climate change kills people. Anti-abortion groups kill people. Racist rhetoric gets people killed. These words have real life consequences, and we should not be giving these people platforms. This
is an important conversation only because people like to obscure what their own ideology is, right? They like to make these little vague statements about when they're defending white supremacists, or they're defending the right of Betsy DeVos or Charles Murray or Brett Stevens. They're defending their choice to keep patronizing the New York Times as something that's not indicative of some kind of moral failing on theirs. And I'm here to tell you that it is.
Yes,
it's just like when you retweet David Frum, you are validating the idea that he's a good person.
That's it. The death of 1 million people is no big
You're
deal.
validating it, and like this sort of desire to quibble over, well, why can't we just engage with people's ideas and not their whole being is stupid. Because frankly, if it wasn't if you weren't engaging with their whole being, you would they're not hiring Brett Stevens because he's a good writer.
No,
because there are plenty of good writers. You're not tweeting David Frum because he has a good idea, because plenty of people have good ideas. You're tweeting him because you want the legitimacy of that. You want that right validation. You the people on the left are so afraid of appearing too on the left. And not only did fear appear to on the left, and this fear is born out of the fact that they aren't that on the left. Well, they want the validation of the right.
But that gets back to the whole thing, like I was talking earlier about the Clinton strategy, the DLC strategy of triangulation. They coined the phrase socially liberal, economically conservative. They weren't that liberal to begin with. As Adair was saying, there is no really liberal left. There's a neoliberal left, but there's not a real cohesive liberal left. They don't want to admit what their ideology is, because their ideology is so fucking unpopular and so against what it means and what has been taken for granted as the American way or the American dream, that's it. They have nowhere else to retreat to. So what, like you're saying, where they search for validation in coming to some sort of meeting of the minds with these right-wing ideologues, idiot. It's idiot.
Well, a lot of their validation comes from what liberals like to be the adults, right? That's a big part of their pathology. I'm the adult. Everyone, people on the far left are childish, and this comes from the I'm not a big fan of David Graeber's work, but he makes this point in one of his books that a lot of the people who are now like center liberal elite media heads, they were leftists. They were. Look at Van Jones. Van Jones was a Maoist at one point. Van Jones was a Maoist, but like as they get older and they start making money, they start making capitulation after capitulation, they adopt this air that the people on the left are idealistic, like they're dreamers, they're childish, they're living in a fantasy world that just does the liberal position is the mature position, and I matured into it. They don't think like, well, no, I was corrupted into it.
Right,
which is what it is. Like I was corrupted into it, and so in a lot of ways, this is this is projection. And so when they look to the left, they think to themselves like they feel a little bit of that, deep down, I'm doing the wrong thing.
Well, and also, but also
it reminds them of it of the fact that they at the end of the day, like they became morally bankrupt.
And it's also the lying about what the left really is. I mean, that gets to the whole like you just said, the idea that Bernie Sanders is some sort of Maoist communist is ludicrous. And the fact that his ideas are treated as ludicrous when really a lot of what he's talking about is going backwards in U.S. history towards social programs and making them more equitable. And it's like, you got to be kidding me.
Also, yeah, I mean, also you got to, and these social programs for, again, people who are actually Maoist or at least Leninist Marxist or whatever, they'll tell you that they all they do is serve to protect capitalism.
Right.
That's what a capitalist voter is. I know I said that word a lot. Now, it's someone who someone who capitulates to capitalism and ultimately installs some sort of half measures to make sure capitalism stays afloat. And so what I was going to say about the centrists, these centrist liberals who infect our media. I'm sorry, I meant infest our media. No, I did both same thing. Infect our media. It's here's why you can't trust the mainstream media, and here's why you can't trust anybody who gets too big. It's not an issue of corruption all the time. A lot of it's just an issue of demographics, and a lot of it is and also an issue of just standpoint. Like anyone who has made their wealth, rather not anyone. Let me be a little nuance in this. The majority of people who have made has found success within the system do not see the need to change it.
Right.
Because as you find success within the system, you start to believe in the meritocracy, and it's another reason why people believe that there's a big Russia conspiracy going on, because at least that validates the meritocracy. No one wants to believe that some dumb person was able to make millions of dollars in America and was also able to become president, just because our system is so easily gamed that it's that's a viable strategy. They would prefer to believe that there's a big conspiracy because at least that validates the meritocracy. It validates what they think be true about America. But
yes,
so and I'll bring this back to the primary. And when I start, the primary, when I started losing faith in a lot of members of left wing media and a lot of members of mainstream media who had been a little bit more judicious towards Bernie Sanders, it's when they started talking about their own personal lives and how Clinton wasn't going to be so bad, and how everything was going to be fine, and how their daughters and wives and grandmothers were so happy that they would have a female president. I get it now. It's you can't think outside of yourself. And right. So and I hate to rehash this lesser of two evils argument, but it's actually intrinsically connected to the whole Trump Comey thing, and that we have this habit as human beings, as people who think of ourselves as good people, of framing the lesser evil as the good. When honestly, the lesser evil is just that. It's the less evil option. It's still evil, just a little bit less. Just like Diet Coke is a little bit less shit than Diet Coke is a little bit more shit than Coke Zero.
Can I ask you a question though?
No. Sorry, go ahead.
For you, I want to ask Adair, I want to ask you, which I want to ask all of you. Are you guys honestly we've been talking about this all night, and one of the things that we keep coming back to is we keep fucking litigating the primary. How sick of this shit are you guys?
Adair, you take that first, if you would.
I'm so beyond over it, and I think Democrats are full of shit, and we can all prove it mathematically. That's the point that I'm at.
Yeah.
We can create a mathematical model to prove just how full of shit they are and how full of shit the primaries were. I am absolutely beyond. It's like Russia and I don't fucking care. Go away. Say something that has merit. Say something that has meaning. Talk to me about something that actually matters. I no longer care. We know it's the system screwed up. The more we talk about it, the more people are just going to cry about it, and people that are actually going to do something or already do something about it.
Yeah.
So to just we're beating a dead horse.
I wasn't going to relitigate the primary so much as I was going to make a point about like the media's where the media is at and why they can't be trusted in the future. And the primary in particular was just a good example of that.
But here's the thing: is that we've been essentially relitigating the primary all night in almost everything that we're talking about, except possibly the
primary never ended. It never ended. Because you know why we here's the thing, right? And I'll give you an answer that no one probably not. I'm sorry. I will give you an answer that no one else will probably give you about why we keep relegating the primary. Because the primary that we did between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, apart from the cheating or whatever you want to call it, was the conversation we need to be having as a country. The conversation between Clinton and Trump is not a productive conversation because one leads to the other, right? And so this is why I fight with people about, well, why does Clinton need to have, to accept all blame? Why does the DNC need to accept all blame? Why can't we just fight Trump right now? It's because that's not a valuable conversation to me.
Yeah.
And like the valuable conversation to me is why can't the valuable conversation to me is like the difference between Trump and Clinton and all of the establishment and someone like Bernie Sanders in the primary. Not where Bernie Sanders is now, because I don't give a shit about Bernie Sanders where he is now. Where he is now. But like to me, that's the last time we saw an actual, discrepancy between two positions that was worthwhile a conversation to have. And the problem with that, and the reason we have to keep relitigating it, is because frankly, nothing has changed since then. Yeah. You would think the Bernie Sanders primary, and the fact that the Clinton machine lost to Donald J. Trump for so many different reasons that it's hard to pick just one, is indicative of the Democratic Party's inability to lead us into the future. And after the primary, after the general election, after the loss, after the past 100 days, where the Democratic Party has still not emerged as leaders. And this is the problem with the resistance. The resistance is defensive. You can't be defensive with the Republican Party. It is a position of weakness, and that's why they will keep losing. They need to be on the offense. The reason we keep doing it is because, frankly, if nothing else, it shows that the Democratic Party is a graveyard of ideas. They don't have an offer to Trump. They don't have it.
Richard?
I think the reason why it's valuable to continue having the conversation, even if it does get frustrating or nauseating, to borrow a word from Comey, is that and as Brandon's point is that they haven't learned that Hillary lost the general election, and the presumption I think from a lot of folks was that would mean that would mean the Democratic Party would realize that section of their platform lost, and that the stuff that was more popular coming out of the more popular person, Bernie Sanders in this case, in the after the election, would get absorbed into the platform, would get absorbed and reflected into the party, and that they would take a note that they should be coming to Bernie, and Bernie shouldn't be going to them. But instead what we got was Bernie going to them even further afterwards, despite them losing to what we all think was probably the worst presidential candidate in our lifetimes, possibly ever in history. And so when your ideas lose to what we perceive to be the worst possible candidate, we should probably move away from your ideas and look for what are more popular, which happens to be the person that you spent the entire primary beating down. And so and I think a lot of people have a hard time coping with that, because it puts some of the responsibility for Trump on them, and they've been putting it on everyone else for so long. But go ahead.
Hey, Richard, how many seats have they lost and they still haven't learned?
Yeah, 1,000+ seats long before Trump ever got here.
They literally don't want to learn.
Yeah, they can't learn. I was going to say, the reason why it's important for us to talk about it is because they're still people. They're still regular, everyday folks. The people that heard that the Republicans passed the AHCA, and they thought that meant that the ACA was repealed and that it was over. Like, those people that are engaged at that level of politics but still vote, they can be swayed into understanding how out of touch the Democratic Party is, and how the reason why they feel like maybe I'm supposed to be a Republican because the Democrats aren't making any sense isn't because the Democrats are or because the left is bad. It's because the Democrats are bad at representing the left because they don't.
The Democrats
Okay, can I make one?
That's what I was going to say, right? Because like the people who made those
Wait,
bad decisions are still in charge. It's like that's
Oh,
why
yeah.
that's why we have to keep relegating. Like people are still in charge. The people who were complicit with everything, not just complicit in. Let's
Wait,
pretend.
I want to talk about why I asked the question.
Brandon, shut up.
Brandon,
Oh.
Brandon, I want to talk about why I asked the question. The reason I asked the question was because, and I'm going to throw Ben under the bus. Ben and I was producing for Ben for this week, helping Max produce, really. And we had this conversation about how this whole thing is just so disheartening and how to continue doing what Ben does on a daily basis while having this happen as a disheartening thing. And, you know, I think that you all three gave like a perfect example. We need to keep having this conversation. We need to keep doing what we're doing, including this show, because this show is reaching people and it's bringing this conversation to people who might not otherwise have it. And the same thing with Ben's show. So it's really important that we see this with media, and we see this with independent media, and we see this with Progressive Army and other instances. But one thing I want to end on, and I want to ask all three of you again, is we're seeing a big push for the dissolution of net neutrality. And I think that this show, Ben's show, and a bunch of others are in serious danger right now. And I wanted to know what you guys feel about that too. And then that was it for me questioning. Then I'll throw it back to Brendan to ask questions.
No, I'm sorry. I know what you're going to say. I just said okay. I didn't realize you wanted to say something else. I was going to say, and also, you know, we're talking about changing the country, right? We're talking about moving in the right direction. And what are we going to relitigate if you don't relitigate the primary? Because that was the last time. That was the last time that we had something that might have changed the country in the right direction. Like we're going to people. It's not as though people aren't relitigating the general election.
Right.
I just don't care what the people think. The people are still calling her the popular vote president. What else is that besides relitigating the election? People are still talking about, you know, the white working class, you know, and how they voted. That's relitigating the general election. The people look to the general election. Sorry, people look to the primary election for the same reason people look to the general election, which is that they see that as the watershed moment when things started going poorly.
Yep.
And in my defense, the people who look at the general election that way are just stupid. And so like and also if that's like so I look to the general election, I say, okay, you know what, people made some bad mistakes, they should all lose their jobs. And I should never hear Robbie Mook's name again.
Right.
I should never see him on TV. I should never see near attendant anywhere. And so a part of me is also just like incredibly petty because I'm not disheartened at all about this whole thing. I think I'm fine. I'm doing all right. It's just like, but the problem becomes, it's just like everyone else who failed, people whose job it was to make sure she won, and people who like went, who went out of their way to make sure Bernie did not get to where he needed, did not get the platform he needed, whether it would have been he won or not. Those people still have jobs. And no. That's not how the game works.
Like we're talking six-figure salaries plus. Because as long as those people are still in place, we will never get anywhere.
Yep, and that gets to Adair's point about the party being garbage.
I mean, I think the whole system is garbage.
Anyone who tells you that go on, sorry.
At this point, I think the whole system is garbage, but I did want to talk about the net neutrality thing that you brought up. Everybody's in danger if net neutrality stops being a thing. If net neutrality stops being something that we actively work towards, that is actively mandated by law, then everybody is at risk. And then just simply because it opens up the monopoly game again. And we've seen monopolies in this country before. And actually, at one point in our history, we had a really good, record of breaking them the hell up. But now we don't. Now we capitulate to monopolies. Now we sit here and we try to do everything we can to make it easier to become one. And so the simple fact of the matter is, folks, if we don't maintain net neutrality, you don't get this show. You don't get Ben's show. You don't get a Noah show. You don't get PA. You don't get our articles. You don't get our news. You don't get the opinions that you guys have been obviously you're here watching. So, I mean, it's important that we work on that. I think it's just as important as it is to work in tearing down the system, because we now live in an age where the internet is a thing that we need, that the internet is the best way to share ideas, to spread information, and at this point, if we don't save net neutrality, I don't think there's any hope that we could ever try and save the country, because net neutrality is one thing we all really can rally around.
And I think that it's the only thing that's saving the movement as itself right now.
Mm-hmm. And just to give some, like, I don't know how familiar everybody is with net neutrality and what it means, but essentially it would turn the internet into much like how your cable, or most people here probably cut the cord in general, but how cable subscriptions works, where you have to pay. If you want access to some things, you're going to have to pay for things that you don't want access to, and or you're going to have restricted access to other services or platforms without paying an additional fee, not to the people that are on those platforms, like through something like a Patreon, but instead you're going to have to give Comcast more money if you want to see, our show and Ben's show on YouTube. That's going to cost you more money, but that money's going to go in Comcast's pocket, and none of it's going to come back towards the people that are actually producing the content, and it's going to destroy things like this, and it's going to lend itself towards the larger productions with big money and that have large corporate sponsors and stuff like that, and it's going to change the landscape a lot, I think, and so and really debilitate and possibly just devastate and end a lot of dissenting voices, essentially. That's where
I'll say about net neutrality, and just about the last 8 or 7 or 9 or whatever, how many months it's been since the general election. The net neutrality proved invaluable to informing people what was going on in the world. Stuff like WikiLeaks, stuff like Guccifer in the summer. A lot of that stuff you wouldn't have heard about had it not been for the fact that the internet is largely a free place, because we know the mainstream media kind of dropped the ball on a lot of those stories. They didn't cover them sufficiently. Same with stuff like Standing Rock.
Well, like your last guest with DNC lawsuit.
Yeah, like a lot of this stuff would not be covered, and things like net neutrality, and even YouTube's new BS. If you say curse words or you say Syria out loud, they demonetize your video. It all seems meant to throttle the proliferation of counter narratives to the mainstream political establishment. And what we saw a lot with the Clinton administration, and even with the Donald Trump, basically Clinton campaign, Donald Trump campaign, was their frustration. Same with MSNBC, really, any mainstream. Their frustration with the fact that they no longer had control of the narrative. Like the narrative was, there was no longer a way for MSNBC to dictate what the left was thinking. Because that was Twitter. That was, the Young Turks. That was, the David Pakman show, or Sam Cedar, or all these other micro outlets. And they are still struggling with trying to figure that out. They couldn't. They can't. This isn't the news and politics is now an internet game. And they realize that they're looking for street cred. Chris Hayes is begging to go on Chapo every week. It's like God. It's just so.
Well, I think one thing that's important about the net neutrality thing, and about why it's important for everyday folks to get engaged and be involved and know and not expect the institutions, or in this case, companies like Google or some of the companies that have stood up for net neutrality, is that we know when the wheels hit the road or whatever, that Google, for instance, in China, they will capitulate. They will bend in order to get more market share, in order to make more money. They will curtail the distribution of freedom of information in order to make more money. So if the U.S. government gives them an ultimatum of, either you follow these rules and support us, or we're gonna knock you down or knock you out through these rules, they'll capitulate to keep their profit. And that's why we can't just depend on them to fight for it. We have to be in the streets fighting for it, just like we're fighting for healthcare, just like fighting for everything else. But go ahead.
My point was that in order for a democracy to function, you have to have a free and vibrant media, and that's not MSNBC and Fox News, and even that's not the HuffPo, that's not the Daily Kos, that's not the that's not any of those places anymore. That's just that's all the establishment now. And so in order for sans net neutrality, our democracy cannot continue to flourish.
Just we're coming up on 5 minutes to 2 hours, so I was just gonna say I think this is
we're gonna cut right there. Yeah, we're gonna cut right there. It's just but for net neutrality, outlets like this, whether you like the show or not, right? You're not gonna hear this on the mainstream outlet. And so whether you agree or disagree with the premise, you understand that the fact is but for net neutrality, there is no media. There is no diversity in media.
So just send it around, I guess, for closing words.
Well, thank you guys for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking my net neutrality question, because I feel very strongly about it and have for a long time. The internet was designed specifically with net neutrality, and the fact that it was never codified until Obama made it under the FCC, it was ridiculous to me. And now the fact that they're going to be so easily able to overturn that is equally ridiculous. We need to fight for it. We need to make sure that net neutrality remains a part of the web. But again, thank you guys for having me on the show.
Go ahead, Adair.
Just thanks for coming, John. Thank you all for watching. I'm not really getting all that sappy. Let's go Pins. Let's repeat 2 cups 2 years in a row. Let's go. I love hockey, guys.
Nice.
Black guy loves hockey.
Aren't you
our local unicorn? I just want to thank everybody, John, for joining us, and everybody contributing. Terry J, I know you've been showing up to a lot of shows recently. Sothiel had a lot of good commentary, and there was a couple other people I think had to leave early since we went long. But just want to thank everybody for watching. You see where you can contribute to help support us down here at the Patreon. And also, I just wanted to mention that. And maybe we'll get a chance to talk about it. Maybe I'll rope Brandon into doing some more talking earlier in the week, but about Cenk Uygur basically coming out with a tweet saying that Hillary Clinton pressured the TYT to endorse their corruption, to basically say what she wanted to say, and he said that they didn't, but then they eventually ended up still encouraging people to vote for her, despite that she told them to, or encouraged them to be corrupt, but neglected to mention that she did that before the voting took place. So I find that highly problematic, and I think a lot of other people are finding that as well. So that's what I wanted to do. But you can close this out, Brandon.
I'll close out and just speak to that. I think it's highly problematic as well, and I'm waiting for. I want more information about that before I say really anything about it. And I also don't want to be pulled into this BS weird TYT leftist media civil wars going on. Don't tweet me with that shit. I swear to God, do not.
So
do not slide into my DMs to ask me my opinions. I don't have any of them on them. I don't know anyone involved in this situation. Watch my show and leave it at that. No, I wanted to thank you all for joining us. Sorry if things got a little bit heated. Did they? No, I don't. They did.
I don't think they did. Did they?
Everything was fine. Oh yeah, I was just going to say thank you to all of our early patrons. If you are a patron of the Discourse, there's a Patreon link somewhere you can check out. I'm still trying to figure out how Patreon works. So please send me a DM, and I will, if you are a patron, and I will respond to your DM and tell me who you are and how much you've pledged, and I will fulfill whatever I said I would fulfill for you. If not, it's slide to DMs. It's not going to take me a while to figure it out. If that does not turn you off of becoming a patron of the Discourse, please feel free to. Ultimately, though, thank you all for joining us. This is very cathartic for me, and thank you again, Ben, for letting us be on your channel for 2 hours. Thank you, John, for joining us. It's always a pleasure. Have a good night, and that's been the Discourse with a bunch of assholes.
All right, now don't start talking. I'm playing the outro music.
I'll do what I want.
Maybe if it wants to. Give me a second.
I should just make a different outro music.
It's not our show unless there's technical difficulties, folks.
Yeah, apparently it wanted to close. We were getting a little lag, so I think it got closed at some point. There it goes. Thanks.
My fellow Americans,
how much worse can it get?
I know how disappointed you feel because
The vast majority of the media has said nothing of substance.
this is painful, and it will be for a long time. But I want you to remember this.
the change only happens when ordinary people get involved.
It will not be a peaceful change.
To quote the great Leonard Cohen,
It will be a usurpation.
And to all who are watching this,
Democrats or Republicans,
Whether you are young or whether you're young at heart, I won't stop.
those who ignore these elemental existential facts are traitors, and the usurper will live in infamy.
may God bless you.